"Mr. Whitmore, don't eat that cake." Emily Carter's desperate warning cut through the applause as a brutal blizzard buried Chicago beneath snow and ice. Inside the Grand Lakeview Ballroom, 200 wealthy guests watched billionaire Ethan Whitmore raise a silver fork toward the only slice of cake decorated with a tiny silver sugar rose. Minutes earlier, Emily had found an empty syringe in the kitchen trash. She had also overheard Ethan's elegant fiancée whisper to an unfamiliar server, "Make sure he gets the slice with the silver flower." But how could the suspicion of a poor maid outweigh the reputation of a wealthy, respected woman? When Ethan's fork was only inches from the cake, Emily rushed through the crowd. She deliberately caught her shoe on the leg of a chair and stumbled toward the head table. Then she raised her hand and slammed it directly onto Ethan's slice. Chocolate frosting splattered across the white tablecloth. The silver flower shattered, and the entire piece of cake collapsed beneath Emily's palm. "What the hell have you done?" Ethan shouted. Victoria Hale jumped to her feet, her face suddenly pale. "Fire her immediately." Emily's hand throbbed beneath the crushed cake, but she refused to move it. A thin, oily liquid began leaking from the ruined layers and running between her fingers. "I didn't really trip," Emily admitted. "Someone put something inside the slice meant for you." The entire ballroom fell silent. Yet Ethan's security guards grabbed Emily instead of Victoria. The woman who had just saved his life was treated like a criminal, while the woman who wanted him dead remained at his side, wearing his engagement ring. Sometimes the person everyone ignores is the only one brave enough to destroy something beautiful in order to expose the deadly truth hidden inside. Subscribe and stay with us, because the crushed cake was only the beginning. Emily was 25, poor, quiet, and nearly invisible inside the Whitmore estate. Ethan was a powerful widower who barely remembered her name. Neither of them knew that the poison inside the cake carried the same bitter floral scent as the substance that had killed Emily's mother 8 years earlier. But the moment Emily crushed Ethan Whitmore's slice of cake was not the end of the disaster. It was the instant the real danger finally stepped into the light. For several seconds, no one in the Grand Lakeview Ballroom moved. Chocolate frosting covered Emily's right hand and stained the white lace cuff of her blue uniform. The silver sugar rose lay broken beneath her palm. Ethan rose slowly from his chair. At 52, he was accustomed to controlling every room he entered. Tonight, however, control had been stolen from him by a housemaid standing over his ruined birthday dessert. "Take your hand off the plate," he said. Emily obeyed, but she did not step back. The crushed cake had split apart, revealing a narrow, wet line through the center. It was too clear to be filling and carried the same faint floral bitterness that had stopped her in the kitchen. Victoria Hale forced a laugh. "This is absurd." She panicked. "Destroyed your cake, and now she is inventing a story to protect herself." 2 security guards approached Emily. "Wait," Noah Whitmore said. The 15-year-old stood beside his father, pale but steady. "She said she found a syringe. At least look at it." Emily reached into her apron and removed a folded linen napkin. Inside was the empty syringe she had taken from the kitchen trash. Victoria glanced at it. "That could have come from anywhere. Pastry chefs use injectors all the time." "The pastry team uses metal piping tools," Emily replied, "not medical syringes." Ethan looked toward the executive chef. "She is correct, Mr. Whitmore," the chef admitted. "Nothing like that belongs in my kitchen." The laughter around the room vanished. Ethan studied the ruined slice. "How did you know this was the one?" "I heard Miss Hale speaking to a server in the service hallway. She told him to make sure you received the slice with the silver flower." A murmur moved through the crowd. Victoria placed her glass on the table. "I chose the decoration because silver is part of tonight's theme. That is not evidence of murder." "No," Emily said, "but the syringe might be." Victoria stepped closer. "You are a maid who has spent 3 years carrying laundry through Ethan's house. Do you really expect anyone here to believe you understand poison?" Several guests looked at Emily's uniform instead of her face. The old instinct told her to lower her eyes, apologize, and disappear. In a room filled with powerful people, silence was often the safest choice for someone like her. But silence would have allowed Ethan to eat that cake. She refused. "I understand what I smelled." Before Victoria could answer, Ethan raised one hand. Enough. He turned to his head of security. Seal the service exits. Identify every member of the catering staff and preserve the surveillance footage. Victoria's head snapped toward him. Ethan, you cannot disrupt the entire event because of a frightened employee. I am protecting the evidence, he replied. It was the first time he had spoken as though Emily might be telling the truth. Ethan ordered Noah escorted to a private lounge, but the boy refused to move at first. I'm not leaving her here alone, Noah said. Ethan looked at his son, surprised by the firmness in his voice. She'll be protected. By the same guards who just grabbed her? The question landed harder than Noah probably intended. Ethan glanced at the two men holding Emily's arms. Release her, he ordered. Their hands immediately fell away. Emily rubbed her wrist but said nothing. Ethan called Rachel Morgan, the general counsel for Whitmore Development. He requested a toxicology specialist and instructed the restaurant manager to seal the plate, the remaining cake, and every utensil used to serve it. Then the executive chef spoke again. One server is missing. The staffing list showed that a temporary waiter named Lucas Reed had signed in shortly before the party, collected a uniform, and joined the dessert team. No manager remembered interviewing him. The staffing agency denied sending anyone by that name. Security rushed toward the service corridors. Victoria remained beside the table, but the color had drained from her face. Emily noticed. So did Ethan. Did you know that server? He asked. Of course not. The answer came too quickly. Victoria tried to recover by lifting her chin. You cannot possibly believe I had anything to do with this. I haven't accused you of anything, Ethan said. Not yet, she replied. The bitterness in her voice made Ethan's eyes narrow. 10 minutes later, a security guard returned carrying a disposable phone, a rented waiter's jacket, and an envelope found inside an employee locker. The fake server had escaped through a loading entrance less than a minute before the exits were sealed. Inside the envelope were 3 photographs. One showed Ethan outside the downtown headquarters of Whitmore Development. Another showed Noah leaving his private school. The third showed Emily walking through the rear gate of the Whitmore estate with grocery bags in her arms. On the back, someone had written 4 words in black ink. She notices too much. Emily stared at the sentence until the ballroom seemed to shift beneath her feet. The photograph had been taken from across the street. She remembered the afternoon clearly. It had been raining, and she had stopped near the gate because one of the paper bags was beginning to tear. Someone had been watching her even then. Ethan took the photograph from the guard. For the first time in the 3 years Emily had worked for him, his anger was not directed at her. Move Emily to the private lounge, he ordered. She stays with Noah and 2 guards. Victoria stepped forward. You are protecting her now? Ethan folded the photograph and placed it inside his jacket. I am protecting the witness. The word struck Emily harder than the accusation had. A witness was not invisible. A witness mattered. Noah waited for her near the ballroom doors. His hands were trembling, though he tried to hide them inside the pockets of his suit. You really think someone was trying to kill my dad? He asked quietly. Emily looked back at Ethan, who was speaking with security beside the destroyed cake. I think someone expected him to eat that exact slice. And the picture of you? I don't know. That was the most honest answer she could give him. As security led them away, Emily glanced back one final time. The oily liquid had spread across the white plate in a thin, shining circle. Victoria stood beneath the chandeliers, perfectly still and no longer pretending to smile. Their eyes met across the ballroom. For a brief moment, the fear disappeared from Victoria's face. Something colder replaced it. A silent warning that Emily had crossed a line she would not be allowed to cross twice. Emily finally understood the most frightening truth of the night. The poisoned cake had not been the beginning of the plan. It was only the first part she had been allowed to see, because someone had been watching her long before she ever raised her hand. Long before someone wrote that Emily noticed too much, she had already learned that surviving inside the Whitmore estate depended on noticing everything while pretending to see nothing. The private lounge at the Grand Lakeview had been designed for wealthy guests who needed to escape the noise of public events. Its walls were covered in dark wood, and the windows overlooked a frozen stretch of Lake Michigan. That night, it felt more like a guarded room than a place to rest. Noah sat on the edge of a leather couch while two security officers stood outside the door. Emily remained near the window, staring at the photograph taken outside the Whitmore estate. The words on the back refused to leave her mind. She notices too much. Noah looked toward her. Who would take a picture of you? I don't know. Do you think Victoria did it? Emily turned away from the window. She could not accuse Victoria in front of Ethan's son without proof. Suspicion had already placed Emily in enough danger. I think someone wanted to know what I had seen. Noah studied her face with an uncomfortable level of understanding for a 15-year-old. So this didn't start tonight. Emily did not answer. The truth was that she had been waiting for that question for months. 3 years earlier, Emily Carter had arrived at the Whitmore estate in Lake Forest with one suitcase, $87, and a letter of recommendation from the owner of a roadside motel in southern Illinois. She had been 22 then, though hardship had made her feel older. The estate stood behind iron gates on nearly 12 acres of land. From the road, it looked less like a family home and more like a stone museum built for people who never worried about rent, groceries, or medical bills. Emily had not come north chasing a dream. Dreams required time, and at that point in her life, she was too busy trying to survive. Her mother, Sarah Carter, had died when Emily was 17. The official cause had been sudden cardiac failure. The doctors at the small county hospital could not explain why a healthy 42-year-old woman had collapsed at work, suffered violent nausea, experienced confusion, and died less than 48 hours later. Emily remembered the doctor using the phrase, underlying condition. She remembered asking what condition. No one gave her an answer. What she remembered most clearly was the smell. It had clung to her mother's clothes when the hospital returned them. A bitter floral scent. Faint but unmistakable, like crushed wildflowers left too long in rainwater. For years, Emily believed the smell came from medication or cleaning chemicals. Later, while reading medical articles on an old public library computer, she discovered that several plant-based cardiac toxins could leave a similar scent. She never found enough information to prove anything. Her mother's death became one of those locked rooms inside her mind. Emily learned to walk past the door without opening it. After graduating from high school, she worked wherever she could: motel laundry rooms, diners, private homes, and an assisted living facility, where she learned how quietly illness could enter a room. The owner of the motel eventually recommended her to the Whitmore household manager, who needed someone reliable, discreet, and willing to live on the property. Emily accepted immediately. At the estate, she learned that wealthy homes had their own language. Closed doors meant confidential conversations. A silver tray left outside the library meant Ethan did not want to be disturbed. Noah's bedroom light burning after midnight meant he had dreamed about his mother again. A black sedan entering through the west gate meant a business meeting. A white Range Rover arriving without being announced meant Victoria Hale. Victoria was not Ethan's fiancée when Emily first met her. She was simply a polished family friend who appeared at charity dinners, corporate events, and Sunday lunches. She never raised her voice. She never openly insulted the staff. She did something more effective. She behaved as though they did not exist. Emily could enter a room carrying coffee, while Victoria discussed private financial matters, and Victoria would continue speaking without lowering her voice. To her, the maid arranging flowers near the window had no more importance than the lamp beside her. That mistake allowed Emily to hear things no outsider was meant to hear. At first, the conversation seemed ordinary. Victoria advised Ethan about donors, business contacts, and people who could help strengthen Whitmore Development's position in Chicago. Then the tone changed. She began asking questions about Noah's trust fund. She wanted to know who controlled Ethan's voting shares if he became incapacitated. She repeatedly mentioned that a widower carrying so much responsibility needed someone legally empowered to act for him during an emergency. Ethan usually dismissed those suggestions. "I have attorneys for emergencies," he told her once. "Attorneys cannot be family," Victoria replied. Emily had been dusting a bookshelf at the time. Victoria's voice had sounded warm, but her eyes remained fixed on the folders spread across Ethan's desk. 6 months before the birthday party, Ethan and Victoria announced their engagement. The household celebrated because Ethan appeared happier than he had in years. Noah did not. He remained polite around Victoria, but every time she touched his father's shoulder, his expression hardened. Emily noticed that too. The first truly suspicious incident happened on a Tuesday evening in September. Ethan had returned from a difficult board meeting with a headache. Victoria arrived carrying a small gift bag from an exclusive wellness clinic. She told him she had brought a natural sleep supplement recommended by a private physician. Emily was clearing the dining room when she saw Victoria mix several drops from a dark glass bottle into Ethan's sparkling water. The label faced away from the room. Victoria carried the glass toward the library, but her phone rang before she reached the door. She set it on a side table and stepped into the hallway to answer. Emily did not plan to interfere. Then she smelled it. Bitter flowers. The same scent that had clung to her mother's blouse after she died. Her body reacted before her mind did. She picked up the glass, carried it into the pantry, poured the liquid down the sink, and replaced it with fresh, sparkling water. When Victoria returned, the glass looked untouched. Ethan drank it without suspicion. Emily spent the entire night awake in her small room above the service wing, wondering whether fear had made her imagine the scent. The next morning, she searched the pantry trash and found the dark bottle missing. She said nothing. One strange glass was not proof. It was barely even a clue. 2 weeks later, a similar bottle appeared in Victoria's purse during dinner. Emily wrote down the date. That was how the notebook began. It was an old black composition book Noah had thrown away after using only 3 pages for school. Emily tore out the written pages and kept the rest beneath a loose floorboard in her closet. At first, she recorded only dates. September 14th, dark bottle, dining room. September 28th, Victoria asked whether Ethan had changed his medical power of attorney. October 3, Ethan forgot a phone call he had made 30 minutes earlier. October 11th, delivery from North Shore Clinical Supply, no invoice. October 19th, Daniel Cross entered through Westgate after midnight. Daniel Cross was the chief financial officer of Whitmore Development and one of Ethan's oldest business associates. He was the kind of man who remembered everyone's birthday, tipped the household staff, and always wore ties that looked slightly too expensive even for him. Unlike Victoria, Daniel noticed employees. He called Emily by name. That should have made her trust him. Instead, it made her more careful. His late-night visits increased after the engagement announcement. He and Victoria often met with Ethan in the library, claiming they were discussing the company's upcoming waterfront development. On several occasions, Ethan emerged from those meetings disoriented. Once, he stood in the main hallway and asked Emily why the family portrait had been moved. It had hung in the same place for 9 years. Another time, he accused his assistant of canceling a meeting that Ethan himself had canceled earlier that morning. The changes were small enough to blame on exhaustion. Victoria always did. "You've been working too hard," she would say. "You need me to handle more for you." Emily recorded every incident. She also began photographing delivery labels before throwing the boxes away. Most belonged to ordinary vendors, wine merchants, florists, specialty food companies. 3 did not. They came from North Shore Clinical Supply, a medical distributor that did no regular business with the estate. Each box was addressed to Victoria. Each delivery was marked personal care products. Each invoice had been removed. Emily copied the tracking numbers into her notebook. She knew taking the boxes would be considered theft. Photographing them was safer. In November, she noticed a black Lincoln parked across the street from the estate on 3 separate mornings. The driver never approached the gate. The vehicle left whenever Emily walked toward the road. She photographed the license plate through the greenhouse window and added it to her notes. The plate was registered to a security consulting company that had recently received a contract from Whitmore Development. The contract had been approved by Daniel Cross. Emily did not know what it meant, but she understood patterns. Victoria brought unidentified substances into the house. Ethan experienced memory problems after private meetings. Daniel approved unusual vendors. Unknown vehicles watched the estate. None of those details proved a crime by itself. Together, they created a shape Emily could not ignore. She still did not tell Ethan. Part of her silence came from fear. The other part came from memory. When Emily was 17, her mother had worked as a junior bookkeeper for Hale Meridian Logistics, a regional company once owned by Victoria's father. 3 days before Sarah died, she told Emily she had found numbers that did not make sense. Money moving between companies that did not appear to exist. Payments made for shipments no one could locate. Sarah said she planned to speak with a federal investigator. Emily remembered begging her not to get involved. They needed her paycheck. They needed the health insurance. They could not afford powerful enemies. Sarah had answered, "Doing the right thing doesn't become wrong just because the wrong people are rich." 2 days later, she collapsed in the employee parking lot. After her death, the company told Emily that Sarah had been under stress and probably made mistakes in the records. Her personal files disappeared from their apartment during the week of the funeral. Emily reported the break-in, but nothing was taken except a small flash drive and a folder of printed spreadsheets. The police called it unusual but inconclusive. A month later, Hale Meridian Logistics closed its Illinois accounting office and transferred its operations to another company. Emily never saw Victoria Hale's name in connection with her mother. Not until years later. The recognition occurred during a holiday dinner at the Whitmore estate. Victoria mentioned that her family had once owned a logistics company in southern Illinois. The fork slipped from Emily's fingers and struck the serving tray. Victoria glanced toward her. Their eyes met for less than a second. Something changed in Victoria's expression. Not recognition exactly. Awareness. From that night onward, Emily began noticing the black Lincoln. By December, she had filled 27 pages of the notebook. She recorded license plates, delivery numbers, conversations, missing documents, and the names of companies Daniel discussed with Victoria. She kept copies of 2 discarded invoices showing payments routed through an entity called Lakefront Strategic Holdings. She searched the name online and found only a post office box and a filing agent. No employees, no website, no listed office. Yet Whitmore Development had paid the company nearly $4 million in consulting fees. That discovery frightened Emily more than the unidentified bottles. Poison could kill one man. Financial fraud could give someone a reason to kill anyone who found it. On the night of Ethan's birthday, Emily had been assigned to assist the event staff because she knew the family's preferences. She recognized Victoria's private server near the kitchen because she had seen him once before beside the black Lincoln. He wore a rented uniform and carried himself like someone pretending to be a waiter. Emily followed him into the service corridor. She did not see him inject the cake, but she heard Victoria's instructions and found the syringe seconds after he left. That was enough to force her into the ballroom. Now, sitting in the private lounge with Noah, Emily realized the photograph proved the watchers had known about her notebook, or at least suspected she had collected information. The door opened. Ethan entered with Rachel Morgan behind him. He looked different from the man who had nearly fired Emily in front of 200 guests. The anger remained, but it had turned inward. Rachel carried a sealed evidence bag containing the syringe. The preliminary field test found a cardiac glycoside residue, she said. We'll need a laboratory to identify the exact compound, but Emily's concern was justified. Noah stood. So she saved him. Rachel looked at Ethan before answering. Yes. Ethan's gaze settled on Emily. Why did you recognize the smell? The question opened the door she had kept locked for 8 years. Emily could have answered with only the medical information. She could have said she had read about plant toxins and left her mother out of it. But someone had taken her photograph. Someone had written that she noticed too much. Silence was no longer protecting her. My mother died after finding evidence of financial crimes at a company owned by Victoria's family. Ethan's expression changed. What company? Hale Meridian Logistics. Victoria's last name seemed to darken the room. Rachel sat in the chair across from Emily. Tell us everything you remember. Emily told them about Sarah's accounting job, the unexplained transactions, the missing flash drive, the break-in, and the bitter floral scent left on her mother's clothing. She did not dramatize the story. Pain became easier to carry when spoken plainly. When she finished, Ethan remained silent. Rachel asked, "Have you noticed anything unusual at the estate before tonight?" Emily looked toward the closed door. Then she made a decision she had avoided for months. I kept records. What kind of records? Ethan asked. Deliveries, license plates, companies Mr. Cross approved, dates when you seemed confused after meetings with Victoria. Ethan's face hardened. Daniel Cross? Yes. He has been my CFO for 18 years. I know. And you believe he is involved? I don't know what he is involved in. I only know his name keeps appearing beside things that should not be connected. Rachel leaned forward. Where are these records? In my room at the estate. Ethan immediately reached for his phone. Emily stopped him. If the person watching me knows I kept notes, they may already be looking for them. A call came through before Ethan could respond. It was Marcus Reed, head of security at the Whitmore estate. Ethan put the call on speaker. Sir, someone entered the service wing 20 minutes ago. No forced entry. They used a valid staff access code. Emily's breathing stopped. Marcus continued. Your employee Emily Carter's room has been searched. Ethan looked at her. Was anything taken? We're still checking. The room was torn apart, but whoever did it left before our team arrived. Emily thought of the loose floorboard beneath her closet. The notebook was hidden there. So were the copied invoices and the photograph of the black Lincoln. Marcus, she said, stepping closer to the phone, check beneath the third floorboard from the closet wall. There was a pause. They heard footsteps and the sound of wood being lifted. Then Marcus spoke again. There's nothing here. Emily closed her eyes. The notebook was gone. Someone had entered the estate during the birthday party, used a legitimate security code, searched only her room, and removed the one record connecting Victoria, Daniel Cross, the medical deliveries, and the vehicle that had followed her for months. Ethan ended the call and turned toward Rachel. How many people have access to staff security codes? Household management, Marcus, your personal office, and the executive office at Whitmore Development, Rachel said. Daniel's office? Yes. The answer settled over them like another storm. Emily had believed the notebook made her safer because it preserved what she knew. Instead, it had shown the enemy exactly how dangerous she had become. Rachel looked at the photograph again. They didn't take the notebook to learn what Emily saw, she said quietly. They took it because they already knew. Ethan stared at the dark windows overlooking the frozen lake. For the first time, the billionaire understood that the attack had not come from outside his world. Someone with access to his company, his home, and his private security system had opened the door. And somewhere in Chicago, Daniel Cross was holding a notebook that could destroy him. The missing notebook pointed directly toward Daniel Cross, but Ethan knew suspicion was not enough. If his chief financial officer had truly helped Victoria, confronting him too soon could destroy the only chance they had to prove it. By midnight, the birthday guests had been sent home, the poisoned cake had been transferred to a secure laboratory, and the Whitmore family returned to the Lake Forest estate under armed protection. Emily's room remained exactly as the intruder had left it. Her mattress had been pulled from the bed. Clothes covered the floor, drawers hung open, and the framed photograph of her mother lay face down beside the dresser. Nothing valuable had been taken. Only the notebook was missing. Rachel stood in the doorway wearing latex gloves. Whoever searched this room knew precisely what they wanted. Emily picked up her mother's photograph and wiped a line of dust from the glass. They also knew where I hid it. Ethan turned toward Marcus. Can you trace the access code? Marcus held up his tablet. The code belongs to the executive office at Whitmore Development. It was activated remotely at 8:43 tonight. That office is closed on weekends, Ethan said. Normally, yes, but the system shows one employee badge entered the building at 8:17. Marcus rotated the screen. Daniel Cross. For 18 years, Daniel had controlled the company's budgets, acquisitions, and private accounts. He had stood beside Ethan during lawsuits, recessions, and the death of Ethan's wife. He had helped plan Noah's trust fund and had been invited to every major family event. Now his badge had entered a nearly empty office 26 minutes before someone used an executive security code to search Emily's room. Ethan stared at the name for several seconds. Call him, Rachel said. Do not accuse him. Tell him there has been a security breach and that you need him here. Daniel arrived 40 minutes later. He stepped into the library wearing a navy overcoat over his tuxedo, as though he had left the birthday celebration only minutes earlier. His silver hair remained perfectly combed, but a thin layer of sweat shone along his forehead despite the freezing night. He looked at Ethan, Rachel, Marcus, and finally Emily. What happened? Ethan stayed behind his desk. Someone entered Emily's room and stole a notebook. Daniel's eyebrows lifted. A notebook? It contained records of unusual company payments, medical supply deliveries, and vehicles connected to our private security contractors. For the first time, Daniel's polished expression slipped, only for a second. Then he smiled. Ethan, you cannot seriously be building a corporate investigation around notes written by a housekeeper. Emily had heard that tone before. It was the voice wealthy men used when they wanted facts to become smaller simply because the wrong person had discovered them. Rachel placed a printed access report on the desk. Your badge entered headquarters tonight. I stopped by to retrieve a contract. At 8:17, I work late. Which contract? Daniel paused. The Harbor Point financing agreement. Rachel opened a folder. That file was transferred to outside counsel 3 days ago. There is no copy in your office. Daniel's face tightened. Ethan leaned forward. Why were you really there? Daniel removed his gloves slowly. I do not appreciate being interrogated in front of an employee. Ethan's voice remained calm. Emily is here because someone tried to kill me, watched my son, photographed her outside my home, and stole evidence from her room. At this moment, she has more reason to be in this library than you do. Daniel looked toward Emily again. This time, he did not bother hiding his anger. She has no idea what she saw. Emily met his eyes. I saw Lakefront Strategic Holdings receive almost $4 million from Whitmore Development. I saw 3 medical shipments delivered to Victoria under false descriptions. I saw the security company you hired watching this house. Daniel's jaw moved once. The notebook was gone, but Emily remembered every entry. That was the mistake Daniel had made. He believed stealing the pages would erase the information inside them. Rachel slid another document across the desk. Lakefront Strategic Holdings shares a registered agent with 2 consulting firms controlled by your brother-in-law. Payments left Whitmore Development, passed through those firms, and returned to an account in the Cayman Islands. Daniel did not touch the paper. Ethan's disappointment was quieter than anger. How much did you take? Daniel looked toward the windows. Not as much as the company owed me. That was not my question. $23 million over 6 years. The number seemed to empty the room of air. Daniel began speaking faster, as if confession had opened a door he could no longer close. He claimed the company had undervalued his work. He said Ethan received praise while he handled the financial crises no one saw. The stolen money, he insisted, had started as temporary transfers. Then Victoria discovered the accounts. She did not report him. She offered him protection. In return, Daniel approved her vendors, gave her access to Ethan's schedule, arranged private security contracts, and helped prepare documents that would transfer control of the company if Ethan became incapacitated. And the cake? Ethan asked. Daniel's gaze dropped. I did not put anything in it, but you hired the fake server. I hired a man to enter the event. Victoria said he needed to exchange a document before the engagement announcement. You believed that. I chose to believe it. The difference was small, but it revealed everything. Rachel asked where the notebook was. Daniel remained silent. Marcus stepped closer. If you destroyed it, obstruction becomes the least of your problems. I did not destroy it. Then where is it? Daniel looked at Emily. Victoria has it. Emily felt cold despite the fire burning in the library. Daniel explained that after stealing the notebook, he had delivered it to a private parking garage beneath Victoria's apartment building. She had read several pages and immediately realized Emily had connected the medical shipments to Hale Meridian Logistics. That was the moment Victoria stopped viewing Emily as an inconvenient maid. She began viewing her as a surviving witness. Rachel activated the recorder on her phone and asked Daniel to repeat everything from the beginning. He agreed only after she explained that cooperation might reduce his sentence. For the next hour, he described shell companies, fraudulent contracts, hidden accounts, and Victoria's growing obsession with controlling Ethan's voting shares. He also admitted that Victoria had asked a question 2 weeks earlier. If Emily disappeared, who would notice first? Daniel said he had refused to answer. No one in the room believed that refusal made him innocent. When Marcus escorted him to a guarded guest room to await federal investigators, Daniel stopped beside Emily. "You should leave Chicago," he whispered. "Tonight." Emily did not move. "Is that a warning or a threat?" Daniel's eyes shifted toward the dark hallway. A warning. Victoria never keeps only one plan. At 2:36 in the morning, Marcus received an alert from the estate's exterior cameras. A gray SUV had stopped across the street with its lights turned off. Two men sat inside. One of them held a photograph of Emily. The gray SUV across the street confirmed Daniel's warning before anyone had time to decide whether they believed him. Marcus dimmed the library lights and moved everyone away from the windows. On the security monitor, the vehicle sat beneath a bare maple tree with its headlights off. Snow gathered along the hood, but the engine continued to run. One man remained behind the wheel. The other held a printed photograph and compared it to the estate. Emily did not need the camera to know whose face was on the page. "Can you read the plate?" Ethan asked. "Covered," Marcus replied. "They planned for surveillance." Walter Hayes, the estate's 68-year-old night guard, called from the gatehouse. "I've been watching them for 11 minutes, he said. "They're not lost." Rachel ordered Emily kept away from exterior windows, while Marcus contacted a detective he trusted. The front gate remained unchanged so the men would not realize they had been detected. For nearly 40 minutes, nothing happened. Then the passenger climbed out wearing a delivery jacket and carrying a narrow cardboard box. The SUV moved toward the western service road while he approached the main intercom. "They're splitting up," Marcus said. Walter left the gatehouse with the slow walk caused by his damaged knee. To an outsider, he looked like an aging employee checking the mail. "Medical delivery for Miss Hale," the stranger said. "Miss Hale doesn't live here," Walter replied. The man glanced toward the camera. "Wrong address then." Walter looked at the package. No courier name. No tracking label. The stranger's expression changed. At the same moment, Marcus learned the SUV was circling toward the greenhouse gate. The delivery was a distraction. An unmarked police car appeared at the end of the street. The man dropped the box and ran between two neighboring properties. The SUV accelerated before officers could block it. Inside the package, Marcus found plastic restraints, a spray bottle, and a folded maintenance uniform. "They didn't come to frighten me," Emily said. "No," Marcus answered. "They came prepared to remove you." By dawn, the estate was under police protection. Daniel remained isolated with an attorney while federal agents prepared to question him. The abandoned package was sent for prints, though Marcus doubted professionals had left much behind. Victoria did not call Ethan. Rachel saw an opportunity in that silence. "She may believe Daniel has not confessed," she said. "Invite her to lunch. Tell her the police found nothing conclusive, and that the board may question your judgment. Let her think you still need her." Ethan understood the trap. "And if she suspects? Then she says nothing. If she believes she is winning, she may confirm details only the person directing Daniel could know." Emily looked toward the snow-covered windows. "She'll speak more freely if she sees me serving the meal." Ethan rejected the idea at first, but Rachel agreed. Victoria had spent years treating the staff like furniture. That arrogance might make her careless. The call lasted less than 3 minutes. Ethan sounded exhausted and uncertain. Victoria expressed concern, asked whether Noah was safe, and accepted the invitation without mentioning Daniel. The house shifted into a controlled performance. Police vehicles moved out of sight. Extra guards changed into maintenance clothes. Rachel installed recording devices beneath the dining table and inside a cabinet. Marcus positioned himself behind the pantry door. Before noon, Emily changed into a clean blue uniform. Her right palm was still swollen from crushing the cake. The household nurse wrapped it, but Emily removed the bandage before Victoria arrived. She wanted Victoria to see the hand that had ruined the plan. Ethan found her alone in the conservatory. "You could leave Chicago," he said. "I can place you somewhere safe until this ends." "My mother tried to expose something powerful people wanted hidden," Emily replied. "She died, and everyone around her stopped asking questions. I'm not asking you to be silent. You're asking me to disappear. I'm asking you to survive." Emily met his gaze. Those should not have to mean the same thing. Ethan turned toward the glass wall overlooking the garden. "My father worked at a steel plant for 32 years. The owners protected themselves during bankruptcy and erased everyone else. He lost his pension before retirement. Emily listened without interrupting. I built Whitmore Development because I thought money meant no one could make my family helpless again, he continued. Somewhere along the way, I confused control with safety. And now the people you trusted used your control against you. Yes. He looked at her injured hand. You knew my coffee order, my son's schedule, and every pattern in this house. I barely knew where you came from. That was useful. For you, invisible people hear the truth. Noah entered carrying a folded sheet of paper. I found this in Mom's old desk. It was a handwritten guest list from a charity gala 6 years earlier. Beside Victoria's name, Ethan's late wife had written, "Do not let her handle Noah's trust documents." Ethan read the sentence twice. Mom didn't trust her, Noah said. No, Ethan replied. Apparently she saw something I didn't. At noon, Victoria arrived wearing a cream wool coat and pearl earrings. She kissed Ethan's cheek, asked Noah whether he had slept, and gave Emily only a brief glance. That glance stopped on Emily's bare hand. Still employed? Victoria asked lightly. For now, Ethan said. The words were part of the performance, but Emily still felt their sting. Lunch began with careful conversation. Victoria suggested delaying the wedding announcement until the scandal faded. Ethan pretended to fear that the board might remove him because of concerns about his memory. That may not be the worst thing, Victoria said. What do you mean? You've been exhausted for months. You forget conversations. You sign papers and question them later. A temporary transfer of authority could protect the company. To whom? Victoria smiled. Someone the board trusts. Someone close enough to protect Noah. Daniel. He is useful, but he is not family. Rachel listened from the adjoining study through headphones. Ethan mentioned the trust amendment he could not remember approving. Victoria answered too quickly. We discussed it in October. I thought it was February. Her eyes sharpened. Yes, February. In the library. Daniel brought the final language. And you signed after dinner. Emily felt Marcus shift behind the pantry door. No public record identified Daniel as the person who prepared that amendment. Was Noah there? Ethan asked. No. You specifically asked that he not be involved. Another detail only a participant could know. Victoria covered Ethan's hand. You were not yourself that night. That is why you needed me. Then she looked at Emily. Some employees mistake proximity for importance. They overhear fragments and invent connections they are not intelligent enough to understand. Emily lifted the soup bowls. As she passed, Victoria added, Your mother made the same mistake. The bowl nearly slipped. Ethan looked up. What did you say? Victoria recovered quickly. Emily mentioned her mother worked for Hale Meridian. I remember the story. A troubled employee who accused people when she became ill. My mother's illness was never public, Emily said. Victoria's fingers tightened around her napkin. I may have heard it from my father. Your father died before my mother did. The room went still. Before Victoria could answer, Marcus's radio crackled. Movement had been detected near the western garden. The gray SUV had returned, and 3 men were approaching the maintenance gate. Marcus stepped from behind the pantry door. Victoria rose. Why is he hiding there? Rachel entered from the study holding the recorder. Outside, an alarm sounded. Noah appeared at the top of the stairs. Emily crossed the hall, took his arm, and guided him toward the reinforced safe room behind the library shelves. I'm not leaving Dad, he protested. You're giving him one less person to protect. He followed. At the western gate, Walter confronted the intruders beneath the falling snow. You're live on camera, he told them. Police already have your vehicle. One man stepped forward. Walter raised his phone. You can attack an old man on a recorded feed, or you can leave before the patrol car turns the corner. A siren sounded. The men ran back to the SUV. Marcus reached the gate in time to capture their faces and temporary plate. Police stopped the vehicle 3 blocks away. Inside, they found a floor plan of the estate, another photograph of Emily, and a message sent less than an hour earlier. Remove the girl before lunch ends. The sender's device was still inside Victoria's handbag. By 2 o'clock, Victoria was no longer seated beside Ethan as his fiancé. She sat under guard in the library, while Rachel preserved the recordings, and police obtained a warrant for her phone. Victoria refused to answer questions. She only looked at Emily and said, "You have no idea what your mother stole." Rachel's phone rang before anyone could ask what she meant. An investigator searching Hale Meridian's archived files had found Sarah Carter's name on a confidential audit report. Beside it was a notation written 3 days before Sarah died. Original ledger removed. Daughter may have copy. Emily had spent 8 years believing her mother's secret died with her. Now she understood why Victoria had been watching her. The conspiracy had never begun with Ethan's cake. It had begun with something Sarah Carter hid before she was killed. The note in Hale Meridian's archived files changed the investigation before sunrise. Original ledger removed. Daughter may have copy. For 8 years, Emily had believed the break-in after her mother's funeral was only another cruelty added to a week already full of them. Now Rachel believed the stolen flash drive, the missing accounting folder, and Sarah Carter's death belonged to the same plan. Victoria's attorney arrived before detectives finished examining her phone. He argued that the message ordering someone to remove the girl might mean removing Emily from the estate, not harming her. Unless police could prove Victoria ordered the poisoning, they could seize evidence and continue investigating, but they could not hold her indefinitely. At 6 in the morning, Victoria walked out of the Whitmore estate in the same cream coat she had worn to lunch. She paused on the steps and looked at Emily. "You think an old spreadsheet will bring your mother back?" "No," Emily said, "but it may finally tell the world what you did to her." Victoria's smile carried no warmth. "Be careful what you uncover. Ethan's family benefited from those numbers too." Then she entered her attorney's car and disappeared through the gates. Rachel gathered Ethan, Emily, and Marcus in the library. Daniel had been transferred to federal custody. His statement confirmed that shell companies had hidden stolen money, but he denied knowing anything about Sarah's death. The audit note had been written by a compliance manager who died 4 years earlier. His full report was missing. Only the index page remained. "We need whatever Sarah removed," Rachel said. "The original figures." Emily shook her head. "Our apartment was searched after the funeral. If she brought anything home, they took it. Maybe they took what they could find," Ethan said. The question pulled an old memory from a place Emily had not visited in years. Sarah owned a dented red recipe box filled with index cards. 2 nights before she collapsed, she placed it in Emily's hands and said, "If anything happens, don't throw away ordinary things." At 17, Emily thought her mother was talking about grief. Now she wondered whether it had been an instruction. The box disappeared after the funeral, but Emily remembered that several kitchen items had been donated to St. Matthew's Church in Bellwood, the southern Illinois town where she grew up. Rachel arranged the trip immediately. Ethan insisted on going. "This began inside a company connected to Victoria," Emily told him. "You don't have to turn my mother's life into another Whitmore crisis. It became my responsibility when my company accepted money that may have come from hers. Responsibility is not guilt." "No," Ethan said, "but refusing to look because I dislike what I may find would make me guilty now." They drove south beneath a low winter sky while Rachel contacted prosecutors and searched old corporate filings. Bellwood had changed little. The abandoned Hale Meridian office still stood behind a chain-link fence beside the highway. "That was where she worked?" Ethan asked. "Second floor, accounting." "What did she tell you?" "That the numbers were wrong and people were afraid to ask why." Reverend Paul Avery remembered Sarah immediately. "She never let anyone leave the church kitchen hungry," he said. He led them into a basement storage room filled with old coffee makers, chipped plates, and holiday decorations. The donation log listed one damaged metal recipe box placed in storage 6 days after Sarah's funeral. Emily found it behind a stack of cake pans. The familiar cards remained inside: chicken soup, cornbread, peach cobbler. Nothing appeared unusual until she remembered Sarah always tapping the bottom before closing the box. Marcus lifted a thin sheet of painted metal. Beneath it lay a brass key wrapped in wax paper and a strip of paper marked 214. The number belonged to an old locker once rented by the church at the Bellwood bus station. The station had closed, but the locker units had been moved to municipal storage. The key still worked. Inside locker 214 sat a gray document bag sealed with tape. Across the front, Sarah had written, "For Emily, only when you are safe." Emily's hands shook as she opened it. Inside were printed ledgers, a flash drive, and a letter. "My sweet girl, if you are reading this, then I was right to be afraid." Sarah explained that Hale Meridian Logistics had billed government contractors for shipments that never existed. Money passed through shell vendors, returned as consulting payments, and disappeared into private accounts. Some of the stolen funds financed land purchases near future industrial developments. The same names repeated across the pages: Richard Whitmore, Victoria Hale, Daniel Cross, and one Emily did not expect: Whitmore Development Group. She looked at Ethan. He did not ask her to hide it. "Keep reading," he said. Sarah wrote that Richard Whitmore, Ethan's younger brother, used advanced knowledge of development plans to buy property through front companies. Hale Meridian created false shipping losses to move cash into those companies. Victoria managed transfers, while Daniel approved payments from Whitmore Development without Ethan's direct review. Sarah discovered the scheme when identical shipment numbers appeared in 2 states on the same day. Her supervisor told her to correct the entries and forget them. She copied the records instead. The final page carried a sentence Emily read twice. "If they say I was confused or sick, do not believe them. I have never been more certain of anything." Rachel opened the flash drive on an isolated laptop. It contained spreadsheets, scanned invoices, photographs of signed documents, and several recordings. In one file, recorded 3 days before Sarah died, Victoria's voice filled the storage room. "You are looking at transactions that do not concern you," Sarah answered. "They concerned every taxpayer and every family whose land you bought with stolen money. You have a daughter. That is not a threat you should have made out loud." A chair scraped across the recording. Then Victoria said, "Give me the copies, and your daughter keeps her mother." The file ended. Emily stared at the laptop. For years, Emily had imagined her mother frightened and alone. The recording proved Sarah had been afraid, but she had not surrendered. Ethan stepped away from the table. "My brother helped build this." Rachel closed the laptop. "Your brother participated in financial crimes. We still need proof connecting Victoria to Sarah's death." The hospital records provided the next piece. Sarah's original chart described vomiting, blurred vision, confusion, a dangerously slow pulse, and an irregular heartbeat. A physician reviewing the file said the pattern was consistent with digitalis poisoning. No blood sample remained, but the hospital had preserved a pathology slide. Prosecutors requested emergency testing. The attending nurse's handwritten note contained one chilling detail. Patient repeatedly reports bitter floral taste. Emily gripped the table. The same scent had been inside Ethan's cake. This was no longer a coincidence. It was a method. Back at the church, Emily read the rest of Sarah's letter alone. Her mother had sent copies to a federal tip line, but feared they were intercepted. The original ledger was the evidence Victoria could not explain away. At the bottom, Sarah had written, "Courage is not being unafraid. It is deciding that someone else's power does not get the final word." Emily pressed the letter to her chest and cried without trying to stop. Ethan waited outside. When she emerged, he did not offer an apology large enough to sound false. "I am going to release every Whitmore record connected to these transactions," he said. "Your board will fight you. Yes. You could lose control of the company. Yes. Your brother's name will be destroyed. If his name survives only because your mother's was buried, then it deserves to be destroyed." That answer mattered more than sympathy. Rachel contacted federal prosecutors and the Cook County State's attorney. The flash drive created a chain between Hale Meridian, Daniel's shell companies, Richard's land deals, and money that entered Whitmore Development. A judge authorized searches of Victoria's properties and testing of Sarah's pathology sample. By evening, the preliminary laboratory result detected plant-derived cardiac glycosides in the preserved tissue. An investigator also located June Wallace, a former Hale Meridian purchasing clerk. June remembered Victoria ordering concentrated foxglove extract through a veterinary supplier 1 week before Sarah collapsed. The purchase had been disguised as a landscaping expense. June had kept a copy because the description seemed wrong. It carried Victoria's electronic approval. For the first time, the case had motive, threat, and a documented method. Before leaving Bellwood, Emily went to the cemetery. She brushed snow from her mother's name and placed the red recipe box beside the grave. "You were right," she whispered. "They called you confused because the truth was harder to control than you were." Ethan waited near the gate until she returned. "My family profited from what happened to her," he said. "Your brother did. My company kept the assets. You didn't know. I should have known more about what carried my name." Emily faced him. "I don't need you to carry my guilt, and I won't carry yours. I need you to tell the truth when it costs you something." "I will." Rachel's phone rang as they approached the cars. Victoria's apartment was empty. Her closets had been cleared. $2 million had moved from an offshore account that afternoon. Her main phone was found smashed in a parking garage, and a private aviation broker had received a request for a flight leaving Chicago before midnight. Then Marcus received another alert. The temporary plate on the gray SUV had been traced to a closed resort on Lake Michigan, owned by one of Victoria's shell companies. A traffic camera had captured the vehicle heading north. The resort stood on an isolated shoreline, 40 miles from the nearest town. Emily looked at the recipe box in her hands. Victoria had spent 8 years hunting for the evidence Sarah left behind. Now she knew Emily had found it. And a woman who had already killed once to bury the truth was no longer running only to escape. She was preparing to erase the last witness before she disappeared. The abandoned resort on Lake Michigan was not Victoria's escape route. It was the place where she intended to finish what had begun 8 years earlier. By the time Ethan, Emily, Marcus, and Rachel returned to Chicago, federal agents had already surrounded the shell company connected to the property. The resort had closed 3 winters earlier after a fire damaged its eastern wing. Its main lodge remained standing, but most of the cabins were empty. The security cameras were disconnected, and the private road leading to the lake was buried beneath fresh snow. Victoria had chosen it because there would be no guests, no witnesses, and only one reliable road, in or out. Rachel ordered Emily to remain at the Whitmore estate. "You are the person she wants," Rachel said. "That makes you valuable to the case, but it also makes you the easiest person for her to use." Emily held her mother's letter inside the pocket of her coat. "She has been searching for the ledger since my mother died. She may not leave without knowing where it is. That is exactly why you cannot go." Ethan agreed with Rachel, but Emily noticed he did not look at her when he said it. She understood what everyone was trying to do. They wanted to protect her because she had finally become important enough to protect. But protection and exclusion could look dangerously similar. "If Victoria believes the original files are still with me, she will keep moving," Emily said. "She may hurt someone else or destroy evidence before agents reach her." "The evidence is backed up," Rachel replied. "The original flash drive is secure." "She does not know that." Marcus stood beside the library doors, listening. Emily turned toward him. "You said the resort has only one road." "One public road," Marcus answered. "There is also an old maintenance path along the shoreline. Would Victoria know about it? She owns the company that owns the property." "Yes." Rachel shook her head. "This is not a negotiation. You are not trained for this." "My mother was not trained either," Emily said. "She still gathered enough evidence to expose all of them, and it got her killed." The words struck the room hard. Rachel immediately softened. "That is why we cannot let history repeat itself." Emily looked down at Sarah's letter. History already repeated itself when Victoria poisoned Ethan. The difference is that this time people listened before it was too late. Ethan stepped closer. "I listened because you gave me no choice. You had a choice. You could have had security drag me out of the ballroom. I almost did, but you didn't." He looked at her injured hand, still bruised from the cake. "No, I didn't." Rachel's phone rang before the argument could continue. An agent at the resort had found the gray SUV near the northern cabins. The driver's door was open, the keys remained inside, and footprints led toward the main lodge. A second set of tracks moved in the opposite direction, toward the maintenance trail. Victoria had not come alone. The 2 men arrested near the estate had refused to cooperate, but one phone contained payments connected to a man named Travis Cole, a former private security contractor. Cole had experience in surveillance, restraints, and forced transport. He was also missing. Rachel ended the call. "Victoria may have a hostage. No one needed to ask who." Daniel Cross had been moved into federal custody hours earlier, but June Wallace, the former Hale Meridian clerk who had provided the purchase record, had disappeared from her motel 20 minutes after speaking with investigators. Her room showed signs of a struggle. Victoria had not only prepared to erase Emily, she had begun eliminating everyone who could connect her to Sarah Carter's death. The federal task force approved a controlled approach. Emily would not enter the resort, but she could participate in a phone call designed to keep Victoria talking while agents located June. Victoria answered on the third ring. "Emily," she said, as though they were old friends. No one had told her who was calling. Rachel activated the recording system. Emily sat at Ethan's dining table with an earpiece in one ear. Agents listened from vans outside the resort, while Marcus watched the estate doors. "You took June Wallace," Emily said. Victoria laughed softly. "June took something from me years ago. I am simply correcting an old imbalance. Let her go. Bring me the original ledger." Emily looked at Rachel. "The ledger is already with federal investigators." "Then you have no reason to protect the location. I don't know where they moved it. Your mother knew how to hide things. I assumed she taught you." Victoria's voice was calm, but the wind behind her carried the hollow echo of a large room. Agents confirmed she was likely inside the main lodge. Emily continued, "Why did you kill her?" Ethan's jaw tightened. Victoria did not answer immediately. Then she said, "Your mother made her own decisions. She found stolen money. She found numbers she did not understand. She recorded you threatening her." The silence on the line lasted 3 seconds. "That was careless of her. Not denial, recognition." Emily pressed further. "You used digitalis because it would look like heart failure." Victoria's voice changed, only slightly, but enough. "Sarah had a weak heart." "No, she had evidence. Everyone has something they mistake for evidence." "And Ethan's cake? That was Daniel's disaster. Daniel says you chose the marked slice. Daniel says whatever saves Daniel." Victoria was circling the truth without touching it. Rachel wrote a sentence on a notepad and pushed it toward Emily. "Ask about the scent." Emily looked at the words. "My mother remembered the taste before she died," she said. "Bitter flowers. Ethan's cake had the same smell." The line became quiet. When Victoria spoke again, her voice carried irritation for the first time. "You were always too observant." The sentence matched the message written behind Emily's photograph. Emily's pulse accelerated. "You knew who I was before you came to the Whitmore estate. I knew Sarah had a daughter. And when you saw me working there, I recognized your name. Why didn't you fire me?" Victoria gave a short laugh. "Because invisible people are useful. They clean rooms. They carry trays. They hear conversations and are never believed. I thought you would remain what the world had already decided you were." Emily closed her eyes for a moment. "Then I broke the cake." "Yes," Victoria said. "And for the first time in your life, everyone looked at you." At the resort, tactical agents reached a broken kitchen window. Through it, they saw June tied to a chair near the old ballroom stage. Travis Cole stood beside her with a handgun. Victoria remained out of sight. The team needed more time. Emily kept speaking. "My mother refused to give you the ledger. She should have thought about you. She did. That is why she hid it. She chose a stack of papers over watching her daughter grow up. No, you chose money over letting her live." Victoria's breathing sharpened. "You have no idea what was at stake. My father's company was collapsing. Richard Whitmore needed capital for the industrial developments. Daniel needed the accounts hidden. Everyone benefited. Not my mother. Your mother was one bookkeeper in a company employing 800 people. She could have signed the correction and gone home, but she didn't. No." The single word carried 8 years of anger. Emily understood then that Victoria did not hate Sarah because of the money. She hated her because Sarah had refused to be afraid in the correct way. "What did you do?" Emily asked. Rachel raised a hand, warning her not to push too quickly. Victoria answered anyway. "I gave her one opportunity to return the files, and when she refused, I arranged a meeting. With the veterinary extract, a breath." Then Victoria said she accepted coffee. Ethan turned away from the table. Emily's throat tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "You poisoned her coffee." I did what was necessary to protect hundreds of people from the consequences of one woman's self-righteousness. The confession entered every recording device connected to the call. Rachel wrote in large letters, "We have it." But June remained inside the resort. Emily needed Victoria to keep talking. And Ethan? Victoria's tone became colder. Ethan was supposed to transfer voting authority after the wedding. Daniel's accounts would be protected, and I would stabilize the company. By drugging him? He was impossible when he was fully alert. You wanted control. I wanted order. You wanted his money. Money is only useful when it purchases obedience. The sentence revealed Victoria more completely than any confession. At the resort, agents moved into the damaged Eastern Hall. One team approached June. Another searched for Victoria. Then Travis noticed movement through the windows. He dragged June from the chair and fired once toward the hallway. The shot struck a wooden column. Agents returned commands but did not fire, because June remained between them. The sound came through Victoria's phone. Emily heard shouting. "You said June was safe," she said. "She was safe until you wasted time." Victoria ended the call. Rachel immediately received an update from the tactical team. Victoria had escaped through the lower service tunnel. The tunnel exited near the maintenance trail along the frozen shoreline. Travis still held June inside the lodge. Marcus studied the property map. The tunnel ends at an equipment shed. If Victoria reaches the trail, she can cross to the Marina Road. Federal units moved toward the exit, but heavy snow slowed them. Ethan reached for his coat. Rachel blocked him. "You are not going there. She is escaping. Agents are handling it. She tried to kill my son's only parent and murdered Emily's mother. And none of that makes you bulletproof." Emily looked at the map. The Marina Road passed near an old boathouse owned by the Whitmore Company during a failed redevelopment project. Ethan knew the property. So did Marcus. Marcus called the agent in command and provided the route. The agent asked whether the boathouse had another exit. "One," Ethan said. "A dock door facing the lake." The lake was partly frozen, but not enough to support a person. Victoria had chosen a path that ended between police and open water. At the resort, agents rescued June after Travis surrendered. She was bruised, but alive. Victoria was now the only person still moving. 40 minutes later, a police helicopter located her near the boathouse. She wore a dark coat and carried a metal case believed to contain cash, false identification, and financial records. She entered the building before officers could reach her. The tactical team ordered everyone to remain outside. Then the boathouse lights went out. A federal negotiator called Victoria's phone. She refused to answer. Emily watched the live aerial feed from the Whitmore Library. Snow blurred the roof, and the dark lake beyond it looked endless. "I need to speak to her," Emily said. Rachel did not reject the idea this time. The negotiator connected Emily through the helicopter's loudspeaker. "Victoria, June is alive. Travis is in custody. Daniel is cooperating. There is nowhere left to go." For several seconds, only the wind answered. Then a light appeared inside the boathouse. Victoria's voice came through her phone. "You think this is justice?" "No," Emily said. "Justice is what happens after you walk outside. My family created more jobs than your mother could count, and you used that power to decide her life was disposable. She would have destroyed everything." She exposed what was already rotten. The side door opened. Victoria appeared with the metal case in one hand and a gun in the other. Officers ordered her to drop the weapon. Instead, she walked backward toward the dock. Emily continued through the speaker. "You called my mother insignificant. You called me invisible. But the people you ignored are the reason your plan failed." Victoria looked toward the helicopter. "Your mother died for nothing. No, she left the truth behind." Victoria raised the gun, not toward the officers, but toward the metal case. She intended to destroy the records inside. An officer fired a non-lethal round that struck her shoulder. The weapon fell across the dock. Victoria lost her balance, slipped near the edge, and caught the railing with one hand. For one terrible moment, half her body hung above the black water. An officer reached her first. He could have allowed gravity to finish what the law had begun. Instead, he pulled her back onto the dock and placed her in handcuffs. Victoria stared at the officers with disbelief. Even after everything she had done, the system offered her the protection she had denied her victims. At 4:18 in the morning, Victoria Hale was charged with attempted murder, first-degree murder, conspiracy, witness tampering, kidnapping, financial fraud, and solicitation of violence. The metal case contained cash, forged passports, a list of offshore accounts, and Sarah Carter's missing original ledger. Victoria had taken it from Emily's notebook package after Daniel delivered the stolen records. She had planned to destroy it once she left the country. Instead, it became the final piece of evidence against her. The next afternoon, Ethan held an emergency meeting with the board of Whitmore Development. Rachel advised him to release only the information legally required. Ethan refused. He disclosed Richard Whitmore's involvement in the land scheme, Daniel's theft, the fraudulent vendors, the payments connected to Hale Meridian, and the company's failure to detect the crimes. Several directors demanded his resignation. The stock price fell before the meeting ended. Ethan announced that every family asset connected to the illegal transactions would be frozen and reviewed. Victims would receive restitution before shareholders received another distribution. A reporter asked whether he was destroying his family's legacy. Ethan answered, "A legacy built on stolen money deserves to be dismantled." Emily watched the press conference from the estate kitchen. For the first time, she believed Ethan understood that telling the truth was not the same as saying he was sorry. Truth required surrendering something. After the broadcast, Rachel entered carrying a legal folder. "The original ledger proves your mother was a whistleblower," she told Emily. "Her name will be cleared. The Department of Justice is reopening every transaction she documented." Emily looked at Sarah's letter. For 8 years she had wanted the truth because she believed it would end the pain. Instead, it gave the pain a name. That was not the same as healing. That evening, Noah found Emily in the service wing folding clothes into her old suitcase. He stood in the doorway. "Are you going somewhere?" Emily closed the suitcase. "I'm going home for a while." "This is your home." The certainty in his voice nearly broke her. "Noah, I have lived here for 3 years. That is not always the same thing. Is it because Dad didn't believe you? It is because I don't know who I am when I'm not cleaning this house or protecting everyone inside it." Noah looked at the uniform hanging beside the closet. "You're not just the person who cleans. I know that now. Then stay." Emily touched his shoulder. "I need to visit my mother's grave. I need to stand there without wondering whether I failed her. And I need time to decide what comes next because I choose it, not because someone needs me." Noah lowered his eyes. "Will you come back?" Emily could not promise what she did not know. "I will say goodbye before I leave." After Noah walked away, Ethan appeared at the end of the hallway. He had heard enough to understand. His gaze moved from the suitcase to Emily. "You're resigning." "Yes, I can offer you another position. That would still make my future something you gave me. I am trying to make this right. You cannot make 8 years right in 1 week." "I know." His answer stopped her. He did not argue. He did not use gratitude as a chain. He did not remind her of the money, the protection, or the opportunities he could provide. He only looked at the small room she had occupied while saving his life without his knowledge. "When are you leaving?" he asked. "Tomorrow morning." Ethan nodded slowly. "I won't stop you." Emily expected relief. Instead, the words left an emptiness between them neither knew how to cross. Victoria had been captured. Sarah's murder had been exposed. The company would answer for what it had done. Everyone believed the most difficult part was over. But the next morning, when Ethan found Emily's key on the kitchen counter and her room empty, he realized justice had saved his life without guaranteeing that the woman who saved it would remain in his. The key Emily left on the kitchen counter was small, ordinary, and worth almost nothing. Yet to Ethan Whitmore, it felt heavier than every legal document waiting on his desk. By the time he found it, Emily was already on a southbound train. Noah stood in the doorway of her empty room, staring at the bare mattress and the shelf where she had kept her medical books. "She said she would say goodbye," he whispered. Ethan looked at the neatly folded blue uniform left on the chair. "She did," he answered. "We just didn't understand what it looked like." For the first time, Ethan resisted the instinct to solve the problem with money, security, or influence. He did not send Marcus to bring Emily back. He did not call the station and stop the train. He understood that forcing her return would only prove that he still saw her choices as something he could overrule. Instead, he began repairing the damage she had exposed. Over the following weeks, Whitmore Development created an independent restitution fund for families affected by the fraudulent land deals. Outside auditors were given full access to the company's records. Ethan surrendered temporary control of several divisions while the investigation continued, and every employee who reported misconduct was granted legal protection from retaliation. The board accused him of destroying shareholder confidence. Ethan answered that confidence built on hidden crimes was not worth protecting. Walter Hayes received the full retirement package he had been denied for years, though he refused to leave the gatehouse completely. "I'll retire when trouble learns to use the front door," he said. Marcus was placed in charge of rebuilding the company's security system from the ground up. Noah began meeting with a trauma counselor, not because Ethan believed something was wrong with him, but because the boy had spent too many nights imagining his father dying. Meanwhile, Daniel Cross entered a formal cooperation agreement with federal prosecutors. He admitted to financial fraud, obstruction, and conspiracy. His testimony connected Victoria to the shell companies, the fake server, and the men sent to the Whitmore estate. Victoria remained in federal custody without bail. Her attorneys insisted she had been emotionally unstable and manipulated by Daniel. The recording of her confession made that defense difficult to believe. In Bellwood, Emily returned to the small cemetery where her mother had been buried beneath a maple tree. The town looked almost unchanged. The diner still displayed the same faded sign. The church bells still rang 10 minutes late. The empty Hale Meridian building remained behind its rusted fence, as though it were waiting for someone to admit what had happened inside. Emily placed fresh flowers beside Sarah's headstone and sat in the cold grass. "They know now," she said. "They know you told the truth." For years, she had imagined that justice would feel like relief. Instead, it felt quiet and unfinished. Her mother's name had been cleared, but no verdict could return the mornings they had lost or the life Sarah should have lived. Still, the truth gave Emily something grief never had: a direction. Rachel called 2 days later. The Department of Justice had recognized Sarah as a whistleblower whose evidence had exposed a multi-state fraud operation. The state also confirmed that Emily was the rightful beneficiary of compensation tied to the stolen land profits and unpaid damages. The amount was larger than anything Emily had ever imagined possessing. "I don't want Ethan's charity," she said. "It isn't charity," Rachel replied. "It is restitution. The money came from assets your mother helped prove were stolen." Emily remained silent. "You are not being rewarded for saving Ethan," Rachel continued. "You are receiving what should never have been taken from your family." That distinction mattered. Emily accepted the settlement, but she did not buy a luxury home or a new car. She paid the remaining medical debt connected to her mother's hospitalization and created the Sarah Carter Legal Defense Fund to help low-income workers report corporate fraud without losing everything. She also enrolled in a community college program in forensic accounting. For the first time, Emily's ability to notice patterns was no longer treated as an inconvenience. It became her future. 3 weeks after leaving Lake Forest, she returned to Chicago to give testimony before a federal grand jury. She wore a dark navy suit Rachel had helped her choose and carried her mother's letter inside her bag. Victoria was brought into the courthouse through a secured entrance. Their eyes met briefly across the hallway. Victoria no longer wore pearls, designer dresses, or Ethan's engagement ring. She wore a plain jail uniform and handcuffs. Even then, she tried to smile. "You think this makes you one of them?" Victoria asked. Emily stopped. "One of who?" "The people with power." Emily looked at the federal agents standing beside Victoria. "No, it means people like you no longer get to decide who matters." Then she walked into the grand jury room. Her testimony lasted nearly 4 hours. She described the marked cake, the syringe, the notebook, the medical deliveries, her mother's records, and the confession at the resort. She answered every question without exaggeration. When she stepped outside, Rachel was waiting. "You did well. I told the truth. That is usually what doing well looks like." Ethan had not attended. Emily was grateful. She was not ready to face him, and he had respected that boundary. But he had sent something through Rachel. Not money, not a contract, a letter. Emily waited until she reached Union Station to open it. Ethan wrote that Noah was attending therapy and doing better. Walter still complained about the new cameras. Marcus had discovered 3 more fraudulent vendors. The kitchen staff missed Emily's cornbread, though no one had admitted it publicly. Then the letter became more personal. I spent years believing that providing a house meant I had created a home. You taught me that a home is measured by whether the people inside it feel seen. I will not ask you to return. I will only say that the front door will remain open if you ever choose to walk through it. Emily folded the letter carefully. Her train to Bellwood would depart in 20 minutes. She told herself she was going back to her new life, her classes, and the small apartment she had rented near the college. A life chosen by her, not assigned to her. She rose when boarding was announced. Then, a familiar voice echoed across the crowded station. "Emily!" She turned. Noah was running toward her between the rows of travelers, with Walter struggling several steps behind him, and Ethan following at a distance. For the first time, the billionaire was not sending someone else to speak for him. He had come himself. And Emily had only a few minutes to decide whether leaving had given her freedom, or whether freedom also meant being able to return on her own terms. Freedom had given Emily the right to leave, but as Noah ran toward her through the crowded station, she realized it had also given her the right to decide what, or whom, she might someday return to. Noah reached her first and wrapped both arms around her before she could say a word. "You were going to leave again," he said, struggling to catch his breath. "I was going back to Bellwood. That sounds like leaving." Emily held him gently by the shoulders. "I told you I wouldn't disappear. You didn't tell me you were in Chicago today. I came to testify, Noah. I wasn't sure seeing everyone would be a good idea." Walter finally reached them, breathing heavily and leaning on his cane. "I told the boy running through Union Station would get us arrested," he said. "He did not care. You ran too," Noah replied. "I moved with urgency." Despite herself, Emily laughed. Ethan stopped several feet away. He had not rushed forward or tried to take control of the moment. He simply waited until Emily looked at him. The station announcement echoed above them. Her train would begin boarding in 10 minutes. Ethan glanced at the ticket in her hand. "I received a message from Rachel after your testimony ended," he said. "Noah convinced Walter to help him find your departure time." "I was an unwilling accomplice," Walter said. "You drove us here. Under emotional pressure." Noah looked between Ethan and Emily. "Dad has something to say." Ethan almost smiled. "I was planning to speak for myself. Then do it before her train leaves." Emily expected Ethan to ask her to return to the estate. She expected an offer of employment, money, or some carefully designed solution. Instead, he reached into his coat and handed her a small envelope. Inside was the key she had left on the kitchen counter. "I thought I returned this," she said. "You did. Then why are you giving it back?" "Because it no longer opens the service entrance." Emily looked at him. Ethan continued. "We replaced the locks after the investigation. That key now opens the front door." For 3 years, Emily had entered the Whitmore estate through the rear of the house. She carried groceries through the kitchen, past the laundry room, and climbed a narrow staircase to the employee wing. The front entrance had belonged to family, guests, and people whose arrival mattered. Ethan was not merely returning a key, he was asking her to enter differently. "I'm not asking you to work for me again," he said. "And I am not asking you to move back into that room." "Then what are you asking?" "I'm asking you not to believe that the only way to keep your freedom is to stay away from everyone who cares about you." The words settled between them. Emily looked at Noah, who was trying very hard not to appear hopeful. Walter pretended to study the departure board. "And what exactly would I be returning as?" she asked. Ethan answered honestly, "I don't know yet." That mattered. The old Ethan would have defined the position, written the contract, and arranged every detail before beginning the conversation. This Ethan was admitting that some relationships could not be managed like business deals. "I know you have your classes," he continued. "I know you have your own apartment and the foundation. None of that should change. It won't. I understand. And I will never work as your maid again. I would not allow it." Emily raised an eyebrow. That still sounds like you're making the decision. Ethan corrected himself immediately. You would never have to. A quiet smile touched her face. Better. Noah took the key from the envelope and placed it in Emily's palm. You don't have to come back today, he said. Just don't throw it away. The boarding announcement sounded again. Emily closed her fingers around the key. I'm still taking this train. Noah's face fell. I need to go back to Bellwood, she continued. I have classes on Monday, and I promised the church I would help review documents for 2 families who may have been cheated out of their land. Ethan nodded. When will you return to Chicago? I have another meeting with Rachel in 3 weeks. We could have dinner, at a restaurant, anywhere you choose. No security team at the next table. Marcus may disagree. Then don't tell Marcus. Walter cleared his throat. I heard that. For the first time, the distance between Emily and Ethan no longer felt like a wall. It felt like space, something they could cross slowly, honestly, and without pretending the past had disappeared. Emily hugged Noah once more. She shook Walter's hand, but he ignored the gesture and pulled her into a brief embrace. When she faced Ethan, neither of them knew what form their goodbye should take. He held out his hand. She looked at it and then placed hers in his. Thank you for coming yourself, she said. I should have done many things myself a long time ago. Then start now. Emily boarded the train with the key in her pocket. 3 weeks later, she returned to Chicago, wearing a gray coat and carrying no uniform. A driver waited outside the station, but she declined the ride and took a cab to Lake Forest. When the vehicle stopped before the Whitmore estate, she did not walk toward the service gate. She climbed the front steps. Before she could use the key, the door opened. Noah stood there smiling. Walter waited behind him, wearing a jacket that said retired, but still carrying his radio. Ethan remained near the staircase, giving Emily enough room to decide whether to enter. Are you home? Noah asked. Emily looked into the house that had once required her to become invisible. No, she answered. Noah's smile faded. Then Emily stepped across the threshold. But I'm here. We can figure out the rest together. Ethan closed the door against the winter wind. For the first time, Emily Carter entered the Whitmore estate through the front. Not as a servant, not as someone waiting to be rescued, and not as a poor woman grateful for a rich man's approval. She entered as the daughter of Sarah Carter, the woman who had preserved the truth. She entered as a student, an advocate, and the founder of a program that would protect other workers from powerful people who expected silence. Most importantly, she entered because she had chosen to. Sometimes justice does not return everything that was stolen. It cannot restore lost years or bring back the people we loved, but it can return a name, a voice, and the freedom to decide what happens next. If you believe Emily was right to return only on her own terms, press 1 in the comments. If you believe she should have left the Whitmore family behind forever, press 0 and tell us why. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more emotional stories about courage, justice, betrayal, and the ordinary people who refuse to remain invisible.